Hello and welcome to This Week in History with Mike and Will. I'm Mike.
I'm Will.
And what we do is Will researches history and tells me about it. And he's got 1 hour to explain it to me, and I listen and learn. And so do you.
Usually have snappy comebacks and good questions.
We'll see what we can do. Today we are discussing the coronation of Elizabeth I in 1559, January 15th. And Will has 1 hour to explain to me what that all means. Ready, Will?
Ready, sir.
Here we go.
So, first of all, this Elizabeth, not the same one that's currently the Queen of England.
Good to know.
That's a big important thing. She is old, very old.
Yeah.
She is not 500.
Is she 100 yet?
I believe she's close. She's got to be in 90s.
Yeah.
I think she's in her 90s. I can't tell. Once English people hit like 50, they all look just really old.
Yeah, really everyone wants to hit old.
Yeah. At least for white people.
Okay.
I'm just saying. Morgan Freeman's looked the same for 40 years, and he doesn't look old. It's annoying.
I think if you look at pictures side to side, he looks different.
Okay, fine. Rob Lowe
White. Moving on.
looks great. Anyway, I only have an hour.
Make some notes here. Rob Lowe and
Morgan
Freeman.
haven't aged in a while.
Unrelated to Queen Elizabeth I.
Unrelated to Queen Elizabeth I. So, Queen Elizabeth I is the daughter of Henry VIII, the bastard. The guy
Oh, yeah.
we keep going back to him. He's just sucking. So, England. Back to
I
England.
have all my knowledge of history in general. The biggest thing I've learned is if you want to be remembered, do awful things.
Yep, just be a dick. But go big or go home,
Right.
right? Not just he pushed that one kid at one time. That was mean, but
You have to.
no, because the reason we have to talk about Henry is because the way Elizabeth ended up on the throne is really convoluted and weird.
Okay, keep talking. I'm gonna move this globe. It's bugging me.
The globe is bugging you because
Yeah.
you can't see the globe. The world, the whole
I see
world.
the shadow of the globe.
Now I see the globe. Oh, that's much better. That's now there's a world between us,
Oh,
Mike.
that's nice.
That's not good. That's when there's a world between you. We're a world apart. We're a whole.
I feel like you don't have a lot to talk about for this
I have a
episode.
ton. I have a ton. I should get to it. So Henry VIII was King of England from 1509 to 1547. Okay. During that time, he had several wives.
Yes.
And with some of those wives, he had children, and with some of those wives, he did not.
What's the rule for the?
Typically, it was the rule of primogeniture, which is your eldest male son.
Okay.
That's the
Regardless
typical
of
rule.
the wife. So if he has multiple wives,
Doesn't matter.
doesn't matter. The first one was
Eldest,
first.
yes.
All right.
However, there's also the concept of the rule of the firstborn should inherit everything. Now, in England, it was first male is typically supposed to inherit everything. If you don't have any male sons, the daughter does.
Okay.
But then whoever she marries gets privy access to all her stuff.
Wow.
So this
That's some patriarchy.
That's some patriarchy
For sure.
stuff. So yeah, 110%. There's no up until this point. There's not been like a solitary Queen of England.
Oh, okay.
There was one kind of mini questionable one with Empress Matilda. That was during the Anarchy.
Okay.
That was King Henry II, the guy we talked about.
A little while ago.
A little
I remember
bit ago.
Queen Matilda. I remember that name.
Yep. Queen Matilda was Henry's mom, and she had a claim to the throne when King Steve was the King of England.
King Steve, of course.
But there was no real I'm in charge here. They were always disputed.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's always been a man runs the country. Blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
So Henry rules with a relatively iron fist, and it's interesting because he's super famous, but he's not a super effective king. He's kind of a dud. But he is important because he helps spur on the idea of separation of church and state.
Okay.
And also, specifically, he creates the first Protestant church. We talked about Martin Luther last week. But Martin Luther didn't do his stuff until after Henry was done.
Okay.
And after Henry's Protestant reforms were starting.
The Protestants.
The Protestants, because they protested.
Is that why?
They protested. They had protests against.
Okay.
So Henry dies, and he's got 2 daughters and a son.
Right.
His eldest daughter is Mary,
Mary.
the daughter with his first wife, Catherine, whom he divorced. This was a huge insult because Catherine of Aragon's brother is the King of Spain.
Ah, is Catherine of Aragon not a Middle Earth character?
No, Aragorn.
Yeah.
Aragorn.
Potato,
That's close.
potato.
Potato,
Yeah.
potato. Aragon is one of the kingdoms of Spain. But Catherine is a powerhouse.
Yeah.
And she is kind of a badass known throughout history
Okay.
of when Henry tried to divorce her, she basically said no.
Oh.
And then like he tried to do all kinds of scheming against her. She's like, no, we're married. And she was older than him, and she deeply loved him, and they had a child together. And she's like, we should just be happy. He's like, yeah, but you haven't had a male son with me, and I want a male heir. So,
yeah.
So he set her aside and demanded a divorce from the Pope, and the Pope said no. And he said, well, I don't care. I'm gonna hook up with this cute girl in my court that I really like, Anne Boleyn.
Oh.
So he and Anne have a love affair while he's still married, and then he sets his wife aside and marries Anne Boleyn.
Okay.
Well, he gets bored of old Annie
Ah.
because she isn't having a male heir. So he constructs a fiction that Anne is in a three-way with her brother and her father. That's a spit take moment.
Yeah, man, I didn't want to smell the coffee.
There is absolutely zero evidence of this. There is nothing documented. It's just Henry saying this. There is a lot of evidence to the contrary, and just the story of it is utter nonsense. While her father and brother were scheming bastards who deliberately wanted Anne to be on the throne so they could achieve and be wealthy and powerful, because they were kind of like middling rank.
Yeah.
There is no evidence that there was anything untoward going
Now,
on between the
is
families.
that a fiction created by Henry, or do you think he actually believed
Fiction?
it?
Because he wanted her set aside and he wanted to divorce her, but that still wasn't a thing.
You don't think he maybe have convinced
So
himself?
he just said, well, I don't care what you have to do, set him aside, get him out of here. And then I think part of him was convinced, though, that they were trying to control him
Oh, sure.
and possibly take his throne.
That has to be, by the way, impossible for any leader to not have that thought going in your head.
Yeah.
Anytime people tell you what to do or organize, you're like, oh, they made my bed. They're trying to control me.
They're trying to control me. Exactly. Yeah.
Can't control me.
Can't control me with clean sheets. What are you doing?
I'm the king.
You will not. Especially for an absolute monarch, right? Like a guy who's like, I'm divine. I'm determined by God to rule. So,
But it's also, in general, just for any rulers,
anybody.
any sort of thing, it becomes a weird paradox of the more power you get, the more paranoid you are that people are trying to undermine your power, so you actually don't have power.
Yep.
There's never a point where you have absolute power because you're always afraid.
has that happened to you yet as a city alderman?
Not as alderman,
Not as
but
alderman yet?
as leader of people,
As
it
a
has
leader of
happened to
people,
me, yes.
as like a director, maybe?
Yes.
I feel like as a director that probably happens.
I think it happens. I'm sure it happens with any leader of people, and the higher the stakes, the
The exact. I think it's all about the stakes,
Yeah,
right? Like if
sure.
you're the leader of a tic-tac-toe group, it's not so big.
right.
But if you're the
And yet
leader,
there still is.
yes. But and then a small business, it's like, and then
Yeah.
a bigger business or a local government, and then it gets progressively worse, probably. Yeah. And then king, who's been told his whole life, God chose you. You get a bit of an ego and
Yeah.
a little bit of a paranoia. And Henry was not a fan of counsel. He did not like having people give him advice.
Yeah.
He would have like one favorite at a time, but almost every single time he would have them killed eventually for something.
I advise you don't do that.
One of them, the execution was botched.
Ooh.
They apparently got the executioner roaring drunk beforehand, so he was real sloppy with the axe, and it took like 5 hits to kill the guy. It was not pleasant. Unlike what happens with Anne Boleyn.
Yes.
Who gets her head cut off
Oh.
for treason, because cheating on the king is treason, and also they threw in the charges of like having sex with her brother and father,
Allegedly.
incest. But apparently that was very cleanly done.
Okay, good. Well, she's a lady.
Yes, they did, and they hired a specialist.
All right. Why else is she famous? Why do I know that name?
Anne of 1,000 Days. They made a film about it.
It's not.
She was in this series, The Tudors.
It's not
I don't know why is she that's her claim
I'll
to
look it up.
fame was being married to Henry VIII.
Yeah, I've heard the name before though. Like in
She's
a
got a
song.
really unfair and unpleasant reputation of being like this kind of a whore, and she was like power hungry, and like every woman in history who
Yeah.
ever accomplishes anything, they give her a nasty reputation. Like Cleopatra always has a horrible reputation. But if you look at the facts, it really was she was at court. Her father was very manipulative. Her brother was very power hungry, and Henry was very powerful. And at the time, he was a handsome guy, for Renaissance king. I guess.
Well,
I don't know.
who are we to judge?
In the TV show, they have him played by Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, who's a very handsome guy.
Sure.
So they're like, I think they tried to, you gotta make him look really good.
Sure.
But he was this charming guy, and if the king says, "I like you," you typically go with the king.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But of course, because he was writing the history afterwards, you're going to make her look bad.
Yes.
And then she has all this horrible stuff said about her. So she's painted as just this awful, awful human being, which is not necessarily true. She very well could have been.
Sure.
We weren't there. We
don't
don't know. And usually she's portrayed as kind of a power grabber.
Okay.
Even in the most flattering portrayals, she wants power.
I feel like I heard it like her name in a song, like a They Might Be Giants song.
Probably. They might have. She's been referenced a lot. She was kind of considered a more modern Cleopatra kind of figure. Pursued by men of power,
Sure.
caused some problems, eventually died.
But ultimately, we're not
Violently.
talking about her today anyway.
No, but we're talking about her daughter.
Her daughter. Oh,
Elizabeth is
her daughter.
daughter.
Okay.
So that's a very important person.
Sure.
And then
Is Mary, the other daughter or the other wife? Is it Mary?
there's a Mary.
Who's that?
Mary is Catherine of Aragon's daughter.
Okay, that's not Mary, Queen of Scots.
No,
a
that's
different Mary.
Elizabeth's cousin.
Okay.
It's very confusing.
Yeah, that's fine. I've heard of that name too.
And then, I gotta get the wife right, because there's several Janes involved in this story as well. But man, I should have written this one down, because who she is isn't as important as who her child is. So Henry has a son, and his name is Edward. And that guy, he has several sons, some illegitimate too, because he just does what he wants. He's a horrible person that way.
Good to be king.
It's good to be king. So they don't all live, right? This is a era of high infant mortality.
Sure.
And
Wait, are
horrible
you saying
illnesses.
some of them are still alive?
No, they're all dead.
All right.
Everyone.
So
everyone then is dead.
Okay. For a moment.
No, they found this. They were actually like immortals from Highlander.
Yeah. Well,
And
what I
that's why
thought.
you cut off everybody's head.
Oh.
You gotta make
that
sure they're
makes
dead.
sense now.
Jane Seymour. I should know that, because
Jane Seymour.
Dr. Quinn, medicine woman. Same name, totally
Yeah.
different person. Totally different person, but famous for similar reasons. She was like this stunning beauty, and like Henry was smitten with her, and she's the one who lives. Jane Seymour lives. She was Henry's last and favorite wife.
Oh, such.
Probably because she bore him a son that lived.
Okay.
But she was considered by pretty much everybody to be really, really likable. She was a lot more passive, probably, which is probably why they consider her likable. That nothing disrupts the patriarchy
Sure.
than a woman with an attitude.
With
And Anne Boleyn seems...
With ideas and thoughts.
And Anne Boleyn kind of had a little bit of fire, whereas Jane was considered a gentlewoman, and she was respected and all this stuff. So Jane has...
Kept her mouth shut.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah,
Yeah.
as gross and nasty as that is. Yeah. So she has Edward.
Who does?
Jane Seymour.
Jane has Edward.
Jane has Edward. So right now we got 3 kids under Henry, each with a different parent. Or a different mother.
Yep.
So Henry is just going through women. And this is not like Henry had several other kids, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if we have a list. Let's see if we can find a quick list of all his children.
I was asking before, because I was thinking before, Henry was king until 1540 something, you said?
Yes, 47.
And Elizabeth is not coronated until 1559. Seems like there's a couple of years in there.
Just a couple of years.
Let's find out
Let's
what
find
happens.
out after that. That's why I got to jump ahead.
Yeah.
So, after Henry dies, Edward takes the throne.
Boom.
Edward's 8.
Boom.
Exactly.
His crown doesn't fit.
It fits around his neck.
No.
It just
All right.
reminds me of the Sword and the Stone. where they put the crown on King Arthur at the end and it just keeps going flop because it just doesn't fit. Right?
8's pretty young to be king.
8's really young to be king. It's not uncommon at this time because
you got advisors and things.
High mortality. You've got advisors and chancellors and regents and stuff. There's a little more order than like the Middle Ages. This is the Renaissance now.
Yeah.
It's a little less chaotic, but still the line of succession and the peaceful transfer of power is not always guaranteed.
Okay.
But Edward proves himself to be a very smart kid. He loved his dad. He loved his mom, and he treats his siblings with respect, even though this is important. Henry straight up disowned one of his daughters.
Oh.
Then when he had a chance later, he disowned the other. So he had 2 laws of succession that disowned his first 2 children.
Who were they and why were they disowned?
Elizabeth and Mary. They are disowned.
Because...
as bastards.
To cement his new marriage.
Cement every new marriage, exactly. Right. So after he ditched Catherine, he was like, all right, I renounce Mary. Right. Well, then he beat heads Anne Boleyn, and he's like, and I renounce my other child. And she's like, 7?
You know, I thought divorce was tough in the 80s.
Right? When I was a kid, my parents' divorce was a little rough, but...
yeah, a little bit bad, but not...
But my parents weren't, like, decapitated, and I wasn't, so he does this, and it's to secure Edward's place as king. So Edward becomes king at 8. So he's got advisors, but he also has his own ideas. But at first, they're not really letting him have, he's 8. So he's not come into what's called his majority. But eventually what he gets really fascinated by...
I want a dragon.
I shall be given a toy every day, and I will create Toy Day, where everyone gets toys. Fortunately, they guide him.
Sure.
But he was apparently really intrigued by religion, and specifically his dad's idea of religion. So he made a law that from then on, all masses... Well, first of all, mass would be abolished. There's no mass. The church service wouldn't be the formal...
That does sound like an 8-year-old request.
Well, he said...
Can we not do church anymore?
Well, he said the church service, he didn't like it because his beef with it was the Catholic belief of transubstantiation, which is the idea that when Jesus was at table at the Last Supper and he said, here, this bread is my body, eat it, and here is this wine, and that's my blood, they take it literally.
Yeah.
And Henry was like, well, that's stupid. And then Edward was like, yeah, that's dumb, because it's still just bread. That's their perception.
Sure.
So they didn't like... That's a big part of a lot of Protestant faiths is they don't believe in the transubstantiation, the changing of the bread and the wine into the body and blood.
That was seemed like a weird one to argue about anyway.
Yeah, it's... But they're gonna. It's religion. Sure. You're gonna argue over the things of, well, I don't believe that it's bread. I believe that it's, flesh. And they're like, yeah, that's cannibalism, and that's gross. And like, no, but it's important because of the meaning. And like, yeah, I agree about the meaning. And they're like, no, but it's not. It's about the eating meat. And they're like, no, that's...
Yeah, that does seem like a stupid argument.
Kill millions of people over this kind of thing.
Yeah, that's even worse argument.
What to do? So there's a fight about this. So the kid is like, well, we're not going to have that part of the mass anymore. And the religious gatherings are just going to be readings of the gospel. And also mandatory in English from now on. No more of this Latin nonsense.
Edward decided
Nobody knows what's going on. English.
All right.
And he's given credit for it. Not even like his advisors. He's like, no, this is a... Maybe not when he was 8.
Maybe. Who knows?
But as he got older, and and also at that time, you were force-fed a lot of information. Like, you're going to be king, so you need to take this stuff seriously. So
that seems like an 8-year-old request, though. Still,
I don't want to go to church anymore.
But like a logic too of like, why not? Well, I can't understand what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, because we do it in Latin. Why?
Why?
Because we always have. Why?
Exactly.
Can I change it? You're the king.
You're the king.
Yeah, let's do it. Change it.
Your dad made you in charge of the church. Oh, cool. Well, that one.
Changed.
That's what he changed.
Right.
Let's see what else did he do. Oh, he abolished celibacy for the priests. He said priests could have sex and get married.
That seems
that was super popular.
It seems like a request passed on to him from a priest.
Yeah,
perhaps.
exactly. Well, my dad slept with everything, so I think
Hey.
everybody should be able.
Hey, little buddy. Hey, little king.
Yeah.
I've been
So,
thinking
we've
about
been
this
thinking about
celibacy
this. Yeah,
thing.
all the archbishops.
What's celibacy? You're right. What is it?
Yeah.
Kid.
Exactly.
All right.
You know how your dad was? Yeah. Well, we want to be like him too. My dad was pretty great.
Yeah.
Everybody should be like my
Yeah,
dad.
he was
That's what
good.
we were thinking.
Okay.
So can you sign this? Sure. Yeah, it had
I imagine all this happened while he was 8.
even while he was 8.
Right.
I like here's the crown. They had the paperwork
Yep.
ready. Let's take advantage of this kid.
Someone was making balloon animals next to him to distract him.
Yep.
All right. Sign away, kid.
Oh, look at me, magic. Pretty cool. And, the
And
kids-
now priests can have sex.
and now priests can have sex in England.
In
In
English. English as well.
In English, and in English, yes.
Yes.
Instead of
Instead of
oh
the-
Deus, oh Deus, oh Deus. Now it's oh God, oh God, oh God.
Yeah. Latin sex just took way too long.
It took too long, too many syllables. So anyway, unfortunately for Edward, he doesn't last super long.
Oh.
There is a lot of plague.
Oh, I've really enjoyed this kid.
He was great, right?
Oh.
He lasts a whopping 6 years as king.
From 8?
So he dies. He dies when he's about 15.
Oh.
So it's a pretty short, brutal life for him. Now here's the thing. Though.
I mean, brutal. He was
Right,
king.
he's the king.
I mean, how brutal
he's the
was
king,
it?
right? Like, yeah, he still gets like roasted pheasant and delicious foods, and everybody else has got like.
Yeah, I'm
coarse
going to
bread.
dismiss the brutal thing.
Yes.
A brutal life.
However,
for sure.
he knows that if he dies, the next person who's actually in line for the throne is his sister Mary, and she is a super devout Catholic.
Oh.
She'll undo every single thing that he's
Urgh.
tried to do.
Yeah.
So he makes his own line of succession, which is questionably legal.
Okay.
And he says, my cousin, Jane, is the next in line. Different
Cousin-
Jane.
different
Not Jane
Jane.
Seymour.
Not my
Jane
mom.
Grey.
Jane Grey.
Now, Jane Grey is his second cousin once removed. So she's technically his daddy's grandniece.
That didn't clear it up.
Okay, I'll clear. So I had it written out. I just did it badly. Her grandmother was Henry's sister, King Henry VIII's sister.
Okay.
So kind of like his grandniece.
Okay.
Henry's grandniece. So
Far enough removed,
far enough removed,
but also in the family.
but also still in the family. Directly lined up with direct descendant of a king.
Good.
Her great grandfather was Henry VIII's dad.
Now,
Okay.
little Edward, decided this while he was dying?
Yeah, he was basically. They said you're dying.
Oh,
you're
no.
on the way out. The theory, what he may have had, he had something that was wrong with his lungs. The thought is either a serious case of pneumonia or tuberculosis. So, a highly transmittable respiratory illness. So he catches this, and he's very, very sick, and they're like, we can't really do anything for you, and it says downhill from here, buddy. Sorry. What do you want to do? And he's like, well, I don't want my sister to become queen, and I can't just leapfrog her, so I'll just pick somebody else.
Okay.
Now, Jane is a humanist, which means she's not supportive of the church, but she's not against, like, Catholic people. She's just like, yeah, people are people, and you worship for. And she's.
I like humanists, by the way. I think I'm a humanist.
I think if you're not a humanist, we're going to disagree at some point. You know what I mean? Like a human is like.
Yeah, you could be a humanist and other stuff too.
Yeah, you can be other stuff, but humanism just means you support like humanity and like egalitarian societies, and try to find some equity between people and groups, and we're all in this together kind of a mindset. But some people don't think like that. Some people are us and them types.
Ugh.
And it's very hard to work with them. So she is this very, very well educated, like whip smart. She's described as like insightfully intelligent, but also very, very kind.
Okay.
Not really suited for king or queen, honestly, because
Too nice.
she's called Jane of 9 days, the Queen of 9 days. She was literally queen for 9 days.
Oh, Chain of 9 days.
She becomes queen on the 10th of July in 1553. So we're still not to Elizabeth's coronation yet.
Okay.
And this does not go over well with Mary.
Oh.
Mary's
Were they all informed about this before it happened?
Not really.
Not much?
It's just kind of like
Not much time?
So he died. He died on July 6th, and then she was queen July 10th.
Okay.
That was about as much as information as I had. The Lord said, "Well, Mary, you've got to go and pay homage to the king now." And she was warned ahead of time that they're probably going to grab her and throw her in the Tower of London and keep her under guard so that she couldn't dispute the claim.
Mary had to go pay homage to the
new queen.
queen. Okay.
New queen, to Jane.
Just
She had to. Well, they wanted her to say goodbye to her brother.
okay. And
And
while,
she's
you're,
like,
while you're there,
no. This is gonna go sideways.
yeah.
This is gonna go like she was warned of this.
Yeah.
So rather than go there,
I've seen what the guy before did.
rather than do that, she runs away.
Oh, okay.
To a part of England that is very Catholic and very oppressed by this particularly anti-Catholic nobleman,
Okay.
who happens to be Lady Jane Grey's godfather. So there's no reason why this guy wants her in power at all. Except he does.
Oh.
And he stands to benefit. And also he's set up her to marry his son.
Who to marry? his son?
This nobleman. This nobleman.
This one.
His last name is Dudley.
To marry whose son?
His son.
His son.
Yes. So Lord Dudley wants
Dudley.
Lady Jane, who is his goddaughter, to marry his son, Lord Dudley Jr.
Got it.
Which
you know,
they do.
Lord Dudley sounds like a fake.
That's
name.
why I didn't even mention it, because
and
it's
Like a cartoonishly
it sounds
buffoonish.
like yes,
Lord Dudley.
Lord Dudley Fusselbottom. Yes, no, but
Right.
Dudley was the last name.
Sure.
So Lord Dudley.
Lord Dudley.
Yes, and I think he was the Duke of Northumberland.
Even worse.
Yep, Lord Dudley, Duke of Northumberland. And
He's got to be skinny, pale, like kind of a pointy nose.
Yep.
And,
Very buck-toothed. Yes, hello. Our name is Lord Dudley, Northumberland. Hello.
He probably thought he was the coolest guy.
And he actually did, because from his attitude, he's like, yes, I am Lord Dudley, and I shall do what I want. And my daughter shall my goddaughter shall marry my son, and they shall rule as king and queen. Well, this doesn't go over well with Mary, who immediately rallies support and gets an army. Not a very big army, but she gets an army. And while everybody else is like, yes, we should go ahead with the wedding. The wedding's already happened, and we should go ahead with the coronation, and Lady Jane shall become Queen Jane, and then they make her queen. And Parliament's like, yeah, okay. But when Mary shows up with soldiers, Parliament goes, but, I mean, she's Henry's daughter, so she has a better claim. And all the support for Queen Jane goes bye-bye.
Oh. And Queen Jane's too nice to
And Queen
gather
Jane's
an
like,
army.
yeah, she's kind of a puppet.
Yeah, okay.
Of this Dudley. So Mary acts very decisively and has Lady Jane and her husband get to stay in the Tower of London where they've been living, but now as prisoners.
So like just across the hallway?
Yeah. She basically sends them to separate rooms and says,
Well,
you're not allowed near
in the
each other.
Tower of London, we do have these nice suites. We also have the economy
The
suites.
economy suites with chains.
Yeah.
And rough-hewn benches.
But do they have other, like, you could live in the Tower of London
Yeah.
as well, nicely?
Yeah, it was originally a fortress built by William the Conqueror.
Yeah. I only hear terrible things about
Yeah,
Tower of
originally
London.
that was William the Conqueror's seat of power. He built it as an example of Norman strength. That was his thing. So it's a symbol of strength and power, and some people lived in it, and it was also very easily defended, which is why it became a great prison.
Sure.
It's as good as it is to get in, it's really hard to get out. So yeah, they put her in the tower.
Right, so they were staying in the Tower of London.
Stay in the tower,
And then they went,
by choice.
we're changing your room.
and now the locks are on the outside.
Oh, minor difference.
Minor difference. And Mary rules England for 5 years after this. Now, the start of her reign, she's like, I'm going to be kind of magnanimous with the people that I disagree with. I'm going to let Jane live, but as a prisoner. Her father can be free, and we'll just kind of let things lie. However,
Sounds nice.
she immediately is told, you got to get married. You're 35 years old.
Ugh.
35, your brother died when he was 15.
True.
You are on a ticking clock, madam.
Yeah. And we have no backup plan
We
after
have
you.
nothing after you. Your sister has been disinherited. You've got everybody else in jail, and everybody else is dead. So,
All right.
You need to have kids.
Yeah.
So
That seems fair. If you're going to imprison the people who could follow you, then
you might wanna. So she starts looking around, and they're like, "We really want you to marry an English guy
Sure.
because everybody else is too connected." And she says, "Yeah, but I hate English law
Oh.
because English law. I'm gonna find it. Is where is it? Jur uxoris, which is or uxoris. It's a Latin term.
Jure,
Jure space uxoris. And the concept behind this is if you're a woman with wealth and means and a man marries you, now he's the man of wealth and means.
Boink.
And that's how you move up. It's a lot easier to move up.
The patriarchy. Once again, we made all the rules.
Exactly. So she's a...
That's really the best way to keep patriarchy going. Going is just make all the rules.
You make all the rules. If you're the guy making all the rules, that's how it works. So yeah, she's like, yeah, I don't like that law. That's stupid.
Yeah.
And it only applies to if an Englishman marries her. Then she becomes the queen, and he becomes the king.
Oh.
And she's technically subservient to some English guy.
Well,
and she's like, great. After all of this, after everything my mother had to deal with, after my father, after having to wait, and now I'm in my 30s, she's lived like a life, and she's like, no, I want to do some stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not marrying some stupid English guy that you old patriarchy guy is going to pick.
Yeah.
I'm picking somebody else.
I want to be king.
So her cousin, kid you not, cousin, Charles V. Now, Charles V we've talked about. He is the creator of the Habsburg Empire, like the forger of this massive Spanish Holy Roman Empire unified thing. He owns all of it. Spain and Germany, stuff in the New World, all of this stuff. He's super powerful.
Okay.
Wait, yeah, 1492 happened before 15 something. So yeah, he owns all this stuff, right? He's considered the premier power in Europe, and the Habsburg family is the thing that he's in charge of. He's got a son, Philip.
Ah.
And back in the day, you couldn't, post a selfie. So what they would do is they'd send portraits.
Oh.
So Charles is like, so you're single, and I have a son, and we're only like cousins, so it's not that close.
Yeah.
Here's what he looks like. Sends a portrait, and she's like,
God.
he's dreaming.
I sure love that artist.
Yep. Yeah, right? Because it's like they're not lying about what the guy looks like at all. So she says, I'm going to marry this Spanish guy. Oh. And the court flips out. The court says, you can't marry the Spanish guy.
He had a plan.
Because, A, it takes all the power away from us.
Yep.
B, we'd be like a client state for the Habsburgs. Oh. They would rule England, basically, through you. Because the king would,
the king still is the king.
It's like when Charles dies, his son inherits the empire. So she'd be married to an emperor, she's just a queen. So it's like, well, so I own your little kingdom too, part of my empire. The Habsburg would control Spain, and then Europe, England and Germany, and then everything else they control.
Emperor trumps king.
Emperor trumps king. That's the top one.
And then there's always confusion between who trumps emperor or pope. That one's where the happens.
By that point, emperor.
Okay, but I'm saying, in other times,
the pope can sit there and say, "I'm in charge of the church," and the emperor can go, "Yeah, but I have an army." You're right, you do. I'm going to shut up. And what did you have in mind? It's like it goes back to the old Roman days when the emperor was like, "Yeah, you're the pope because I said you get to be."
Right.
So we've gotten back to that point. Like there's this whole time of pope's actually in charge, but then everybody went, "No, the pope should not be in charge of like secular worldly affairs. The pope's in charge of the church." You don't get to tell us what to do with our kingdoms and our land and stuff. You shush. Right. Sit in your fancy chair with your fancy hat in your fancy city, and you shush.
But the more it's being in charge sounds like a pain. It just
sounds like a pain in the butt. Like you don't want to be a peasant, but you don't want to be the boss, and you definitely don't want to be like the boss's advisor because when the new group comes in,
yep.
So anyway, this also causes a public problem. Because all the Protestants in England go, uh-oh, Catholic queen marries a Catholic king. We're all going to die.
We know how religious wars go.
So this guy named Wyatt, last name
Wyatt?
like Earp.
Yep.
He goes out into the countryside and he says, "This is bull. We're taking her out. We are going to depose her because
Wait.
she's a threat."
Who's doing this?
Wyatt.
The guy who she was going to marry?
No.
Oh.
Wyatt wants to kill her because he doesn't want her to marry Philip.
Different guy. I'm sorry.
Different guy.
Philip. Right.
Different guy. She wants to marry Philip.
Philip.
This kingly guy.
Yeah.
Wyatt is a lesser noble.
Wyatt's a different guy. Sorry.
And he's the son of a lesser noble, actually, because there's like Wyatt and Wyatt Jr. Wyatt Jr. is the cause of this. Wyatt Jr. goes out into the countryside, gathers up a mob, goes to London with the intent of killing her. It's just a mob, not trained troops,
No plan.
not really any plan.
Just-
And he's promptly arrested and executed. Now, unfortunately for other people involved, and not even remotely involved, one of the people he hired on his harebrained scheme was one Lord Dudley.
Dudley.
So Dudley, by associating with this guy, gets his daughter and son blamed as well.
Oh, Dudley.
So they proceed to execute poor Lady Jane Grey and her husband
Oh, no.
immediately.
Ah.
And even everybody in the court and everybody at the time went, "Dude, that was really harsh. You did not need to kill those two kids. Like, they didn't do anything. They were like
Yeah.
19
Hey.
and like madly in love, and they were happy to just stay in the tower and visit each other every so often and just chill. They had nothing to do with the plot. They weren't associated with anything except that Lord Dudley, the bastard, was the father of, the groom and also
Yeah,
godfather of this poor queen. So they get let out and beheaded, which is really like uncommon to just behead women. Like that was
Yeah, sure.
that was like a Henry VIII special. Was just decapitate the women. It's fine. That was like that wasn't a thing. That was considered brutal. Obviously, it's not brutal. Decapitating people is brutal, but especially
thing.
like a lady who's just chilling and a humanist.
Yeah.
Like she wasn't
Yeah.
doing anything.
They weren't causing trouble either.
No, they weren't. They couldn't.
Rabble-rousing from the prison.
They're stuck in jail, and they were like kind of fine with it. They weren't
Yeah.
like thrown in the worst situation, and they're actually pretty happy to be alive.
Yeah.
So they're like, "Yeah, okay, we'll just stay here and chill." And she has them dragged out and executed within like a day.
Yikes.
Yeah. So they're killed. And then Mary goes on to have public burnings of Protestants.
Wow.
A full 280 Protestants are burned during her time as queen, and she decides to marry Philip anyway.
Mary is the daughter of Henry VIII?
Yes.
And who?
Catherine of Aragon.
Okay. Either way, she's a problem.
She's a problem.
I don't care
So
for her style of ruling at all.
No. So she has all these people executed, and she's given the title of Bloody Mary.
Ah.
That's her more commonly known name, Bloody Mary.
Well, now she's a delightful beverage.
Yes.
I guess that's fair.
Right. So Bloody Mary.
Is that where the name Bloody Mary came from, the
I believe
beverage?
so, but I don't know that they call it that in England. That might not be popular. It's kind of like an Irish car bomb. You don't call that in Ireland.
Ugh.
That's a no-no.
Yeah.
I think, and I don't even know if they call it a bomb of any kind. I think like that's passe.
Sure.
You don't
Yeah.
do that. In any country that's been bombed or has had problems with bombing, you don't do that.
Yeah.
That's bad. I would imagine in England you don't call it a Bloody Mary because
Multiple things.
she's pretty horrible. Like the stuff she did.
Also
Pretty bad.
isn't saying bloody a little more swear-like
Bloody
in England?
is like saying the F word, kind of.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like just shy of that.
Anyway.
It's definitely a PG-13 word.
Sure. All right.
So Mary has killed all these people. Well, now she finally gets pregnant, but the baby it miscarries.
Oh.
So,
I want to feel bad for her.
but yeah,
I
then
feel
she thinks she's pregnant, but she's not.
Okay.
And then it's just that she's sick.
Oh.
And she realizes she's on her deathbed now.
Oh, no.
And it might have been the same disease that's been floating around killing all these other people.
Oh, have we not washed these sheets?
No, right?
Can we air the castle out?
How does this keep happening? So they finally are like, Mary, you need to pick a successor. And she kind of begrudges.
Let's have that conversation with somebody.
Right.
That sucks.
So you're dying.
Hey,
Look, aren't you the same guy who told my brother he was dying?
yeah, and see how well it worked out.
Nope, I was right. So you got to pick.
So just have some paperwork for you to fill out here. And
So they settle on Elizabeth, poor little Elizabeth, who after the Wyatt's rebellion thing, she got thrown in jail.
Oh.
Just in case they tried to use her, too. So she very narrowly missed getting decapitated as well. Because Mary just went on a tear. So Elizabeth is tapped to become queen.
Hey, how old's Elizabeth at this time?
Elizabeth at this point. Let me double check because I probably should have written that down.
She's 25.
That's a good time to become queen.
Good time to become queen. She's young. She's considered the young queen.
Yeah.
The young queen. So, and Elizabeth is given credit as being like the first queen of England that was just the queen of England,
Okay.
but technically Mary was. Technically, actually, Jane was.
For a little bit.
For about 5 seconds, like 9 days, but since
Yeah.
it's disputed, that's questionable. But Mary is actually, she held it for 5 years.
Okay.
Most of which, like, unmarried, but when she finally was married, she still ran it. Like, Philip was not made
Sure.
king of England. He was her consort. And he was fine with that.
Yeah.
Because he's going to inherit an empire. And he's a king in Naples, too. Like, he's got titles. He doesn't need hers. He doesn't care. They seem to have gotten on well. She didn't speak English. But he didn't speak English.
He didn't speak English.
But she spoke Spanish, French, and Latin. So they could mix.
Okay.
They just spoke kind of this hodgepodge of those things. It's kind of a nice little romance.
And keep secrets from him if you want.
Thrown into the murder frenzy that is Mary's reign.
Sure.
Because, 280 people, not just killed, burned at the stake.
So when she dies, what happens to him?
Well, he wasn't in the kingdom, so he just ends up with no wife.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He just ends up with no wife.
I didn't know if he got to do anything. Like
He
that.
didn't get decapitated. He didn't have really a claim to the throne.
Okay.
But Elizabeth does.
Sure.
So Elizabeth, and the Parliament was not about to give England to a Spanish king.
Oh,
That was not going to happen. Like, they were like, he's not getting it. No matter what you want, that's not happening. That was
we model.
110% never. Like, the whole country would have been like, we've had our differences, but that ain't happening.
We can all agree we don't.
We
like
can
the
all
Spanish.
agree, nope, that's not going to happen. So Elizabeth is tapped to become queen. Now, Elizabeth is kind of a wild card because no one's really sure which way the wind is blowing with her.
Sure.
She's been very careful about not stirring up
Yeah,
controversy.
it seems that if you do, you lose your head. So yeah.
Exactly. Her sister was extremely volatile.
Yeah.
So she hasn't played chess at all with these people.
Yes.
So they're kind of like, is she going to be like her dad, a whoremongering bastard? Is she going to be like her sister, a not whoremongering but also bastard who
Yeah.
just set people on fire? Is she going to lean Catholic? Is she going to lean more Protestant? What's going to happen? Well, the coronation is kind of a great example of what happens. So technically she takes the throne in November 11, 17, 1558.
Okay.
So 17th of November is when Mary dies. And that is when Elizabeth technically becomes queen. But she's got to set up the coronation. So before the coronations, you typically have you have a lot of preparation to get things ready. You've got to get the regalia all cleaned up and set up. You have to have outfits made. Apparently there's a multiple changes. Yeah, and with all the people getting killed and burnings happening.
Yeah, you might want to clean up a little bit.
Might want to, at least brush it out.
Sure.
So there's all this preparation, and then she's kind of touring around meeting people, right? During one event, there was this mass that she attended. And it's said that she stormed out in the middle of it because she didn't like that the guy elevated the Eucharist. They did the whole thing. Now, Mary had at this point made Catholic Mass set.
Okay.
Immediately after her death, they were like, nope, we're putting back in the reforms that Edward did.
Oh, okay. We like
There
those.
are a bunch of archbishops that are thrown in jail because they, at Mary's eulogy for her death, were like, she was a saint and you Protestants are all going to hell.
Now's not the time, buddy.
Exactly. And so the Parliament was like, nope, not having that. And Elizabeth was like, nope, not in my England. So a bunch of them get thrown in jail or they get in trouble. They get censured. There's this huge problem because there is no freedom. This isn't a freedom of speech society, right?
Yeah.
This isn't you can come up and do this. And also, time and place. At a eulogy, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't come in and be like, It's a stately
Although,
event.
guess when else would you do
Right.
it?
But it's a state, she's lying
Sure.
in state. It's, death of a queen, and he's like... So this causes a ruckus. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who's supposed to do the crowning, is one of these guys who's in jail at this time. So they have to find a guy to do the service for crowning Elizabeth.
Oh, okay.
Like, somebody's got to do it. And since the Archbishop's in prison... Archbishop of Canterbury died. He got sick and died.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's another way to get out.
That's another way out.
Do we know what you
And
wanna
he
do?
just died, so they have to pick a new one. So he's dead. Then the Archbishop of York, he's the one who's in prison
Okay.
because of what he said at the eulogy.
Yep.
Another archbishop's in prison and dies
He did both.
of the same illness probably that killed the Archbishop of
This
Canterbury.
illness going
It's
around.
probably the same illness that killed Mary. Like, I mean, there's thoughts that maybe she died of like ovarian cancer was the guess.
okay.
I don't know why they're very specific about that. Was it ovarian, possibly uterine cancer, which would explain like her miscarriages and stuff.
Oh, okay.
But also, they didn't always know what everything was that caused
Sure.
all the problems, and it was probably frowned upon to cut open a dead queen.
Yeah, probably.
Find out that wasn't like a thing.
I don't want to be the one doing that.
Probably cut them open. This is the parts.
Even if you cut him up, what are you gonna find?
He's still gonna. He's like,
Yeah,
it's all
she's-
a bunch of goop.
She's for sure dead now.
She's very dead. It's all a bunch of like gooey tubes and stuff. I
Yep.
don't know what any of this stuff does. That's a thing. That's a stuff. And it would have been a guy.
Sure.
He's like, well, that's. I don't know what any of these parts do. I don't know what this is. I don't know
We've
what this
named
is.
it the uterus.
The
That's
uterus.
the problem.
That's it. It's all we. That's it. That's what caused the. It was because she's a woman. That's why she died. There. That's that. I feel like that might have been like the underlying. Like, it had to be because of that.
Because of her womanly weakness.
Because of her womanly weakness, she died. And then the rest of the people like, but didn't the Archbishop just die from the same thing? Well, that was something totally different.
No, obviously he's not a woman.
He's not a woman. He can't die from that. And maybe he was, and that's what it was. Yes, haha. Her womanly weakness killed him.
Oh.
I feel like that was the thing. Damn patriarchy. So anyway, Elizabeth, though, she's trying to figure out who's going to do this service, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's got to crown her.
Man.
So she goes to this other archbishop. He's like kind of a side archbishop. He's like the lowest ranking archbishop there is. She goes to his service, and he elevates the Eucharist, and she literally gets up in the mass and leaves because she's so pissed. She's like, this is not our church. This is not what my brother set up. And that was like the thing. That was the one thing he got to do before he died, was establish how church works in England versus everywhere else.
Don't lift the thing up.
Don't lift the thing up and talk about transubstantiation and say
Okay.
it's holy and better than everybody here.
Yeah,
It's, nah,
All right.
you did a bad. So she does not like this guy. But everybody else is in jail, dead, or has declined politely.
Well, it's got to be hard to find a caterer, too.
It's so hard to find a caterer. Like, because again, they don't really know where she stands. This gives an indication that she's like, yeah, I'm a Protestant. I'm not a.
Okay.
I'm not going to stand for this old school Catholic stuff. We're going to change things up.
Sure. She didn't kill him, though. So
She did not kill him.
So they know they're learning where she
has,
stands.
so far, she has not killed anybody.
All right.
Good job. Good
Well-
job. I mean, there's the guy who died in prison, but that's not her fault.
Right.
There are plenty of guys who died in prison that were very much the fault of
Oh.
somebody in her family.
All right.
Like her great grandfather, or the guy he got it from. There's a lot of deaths in like the Tower of London. Like there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they just died.
Mm-hmm. All right.
He died in prison. He managed to stab himself in the back 6 times and jump out the window.
So you're saying Jeffrey Epstein is not a singular case?
No.
All
It
right.
might have been an Elizabethan assassination.
Probably that.
It's like it's been going on for a long time. People
Teach the controversy. All right.
So anyway, Clintons were killing people back in 1550. Is that
I don't
what you're
know.
suggesting?
I'm not
I'm not
alleging.
sure which
I did not-
conspiracy theory we're
I
gonna jump
didn't
down.
allege anything.
I saw
I
it.
am neutral on all these.
No,
all
but
these
no,
things.
it is. There are a lot of like mysterious deaths, but they're like, dude, he got stabbed 42 times and
Whoops.
thrown out the window, and the window has bars on it. How did he do it? And
The
they're like,
shower is slippery, man.
they're like, Tower of London, man. It's just anything could happen here.
Yeah.
He stabbed himself in the back 42 times, jumped off a bridge. It was
it's
real
like
tragic.
Vegas, but not as fun.
They should have a Vegas. I feel like that should be
Yeah.
a thing. The Tower of London.
Like Vegas, but
Is
not a
that's
time?
one of their the new casino in Vegas,
Oh,
the
Yeah.
Tower of London.
it's not bad.
Maybe you die. Maybe you
Yeah.
die. Anyway, so Elizabeth is not terribly fond of this guy, and she has an idea for what she wants to do for the coronation. She's the queen. She gets to make some decisions.
Yeah.
But she picks him, and it's said that he was coerced to do it.
Oh.
I feel like it was you're doing this, or we're gonna Thomas Becket you. And that's not her family line.
Yeah.
Thomas Becket, like that's different. They're the Tudors. That was the Plantagenet family.
But either way.
But still, English monarchs have a way of dealing with priests if they don't like them.
Yeah.
So she's got this guy set up as her archbishop. And what she winds up doing is having like certain parts of the service tweaked ever so slightly. Like
Okay.
instead of talking about like the divinity and sanctity of the church, it is the concept of God.
Okay.
So that it's approachable for anybody almost of any faith to look at it and go, okay. Like she takes out every reference to like the papacy, to the church, even like Jesus, it's all just referencing God. So even like a Muslim could have this service and be like,
So
yeah,
kind
this
of, what
works.
is that? Is that universalism?
Kind of, yeah.
Yes,
It's agnostic. It's
Yeah,
fairly
okay.
agnostic, where
Yeah.
it's just it could be applied to anybody.
Okay.
Um,
Good move.
it's a really smart move because all the Catholics go, and all the Protestants are like, triumph!
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
because the Catholics are waiting for a blowback, like the same thing that Mary did to the Protestants.
Right.
They're thinking this is what's going to happen now.
Because that's what we would do.
Because she showed herself as a Protestant
Yeah.
with the church thing and not being happy about the Eucharist. Is she going to turn around and kill everybody?
Yeah. You know, I imagine, though, the people most afraid are the people who would be the first to kill people.
Exactly. Like, oh, exactly.
Oh,
I
yeah.
would have killed that guy.
Yeah. Wow, she's really nice.
Luckily, she's not a thing like us.
Whew.
Because because it's like if you would have thought that,
Yeah, that means
that's
you
probably
would
what
have
you're
done
going to do.
that. Yep.
Or you're like me, where you're a pessimist. You just assume people are going to do the worst thing imaginable. You're like,
that's true.
they're going to
There's
do.
that too.
Like you study enough history, this is kind of how things pan out. People just murder everybody when they're not happy.
It does
It
end
does.
arguments.
It does. Can't debate with me if you're dead. We could have reached an understanding maybe, but this is just more expedient. Especially if you're a king too.
Yeah.
I don't want to argue. Nobody argues with me. I'm the king.
Who's got time for that?
Tower of London.
Make sure you stab high enough that people at home can see you.
Low. Belly wound. But yeah, you gotta. This doesn't.
This doesn't look right.
Just looks like we're moving the table.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
Stab. Stab. Ha ha. Stab. Yep. Face stab.
Carry on.
So carrying on. So Elizabeth immediately shows herself to be much more moderate. She's not overcorrecting.
Yeah, good.
She doesn't want to overcorrect
Yes.
at all. She's like got this kind of it's not like a conservative kind of thing where you want to maintain the status quo, but it's not so progressive that it really puts people off and it shakes the world.
Yeah.
It's kind of this incremental implementation of her father's good parts. Like her father had like a dream of an England free from everybody else,
Okay.
which is kind of easy because it's an
Including
island,
his ex-wives.
or just his ex-wives free from their heads.
Yikes.
Yeah. But it also is a concept like her brother. I feel like there's like this respect for her brother, even though he was only around for a little while and he was a kid though.
Yeah.
And that was her little brother. And probably didn't like him dying so young, and they were probably still dealt with each other.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have been super close because of the kind of official ban on her. But Henry did like being around his kids, even though they reminded him of his murdered exes.
We still have a good time, though.
They still have a good time. And Elizabeth was cared for. You know, she lived in like a palace.
Yeah.
It just wasn't necessarily with her dad. But so Elizabeth, coming into this, she does this service where it's very agnostic. And at the end of it, it's actually really well described. It's really cool because this is painted, the original idea of it was that it was like this kind of spur of the moment. Look at how great this was. But since we can look back on it, every single aspect of this is really carefully crafted
Oh.
so that she doesn't come across as too extreme, but also she doesn't come across as a pushover.
Right.
She comes across as this young, attractive, strong, smart woman, the symbol of the monarchy, the symbol of England. You know, she's tall, she's got the red hair, and she's their great king's daughter because he's been lionized since he died. Everybody thinks, oh, he was great. And she's not a psycho that burns people at the stake, so that's a good thing. But she's her own person as well. So, like,
she had good PR.
She
Good
had
PR department.
fantastic PR, and some of this is very much her decision.
Mm-hmm.
But Elizabeth immediately decides she's going to rule through good counsel. Unlike her father, her sister, and most kings and leaders before her, she is going to surround herself not with one person or two people, but a whole crew of educated, informed, experienced people. So they go through the coronation, and it goes off without a hitch. Nothing gets set on fire.
Whew.
Nobody murders anybody.
Good.
There's
Check.
no gunpowder, treason, and plot.
All right.
And at the end of it, she gets up and she walks outside. There's some issues with the writing about the ending.
Okay.
Some people say she left early because there was an elevated Eucharist and that pissed her off.
Oh, okay. Or that
Others
could be
say-
from the other story.
Others say they're confusing the stories. Others are saying everything went fine. The one thing everybody's agreeing on is that the beginning went this certain way. There were several changes. They talk about several changes of clothes. Apparently, this is a long thing. She got there at 7 a.m.
Eey.
and probably didn't leave until like the afternoon. So she has changes of dress, and these are really complex affairs. You know? They have all the swords brought in, and the orb with the little cross on top, and the changing of the crowns, and it's this. Everything's fancy and well done. But when she leaves, she goes out and she greets everybody.
Oh.
She smiles and talks to everybody outside and like addresses them.
The people's
she talks
queen.
She talks to all the lords and the nobles who universally, you know, shout, "Yes, we accept her as our queen." But then she goes outside and she talks to people. And one of the guys watching it said it went beyond like the bounds of like decency and like what was expected of her.
Huh?
I'm not sure whether to interpret that as like how dare she, but I think it was supposed to be like a dude, that was cool. Like she kind of cements herself immediately as the people's queen.
Yeah.
Well, again, with her, the immediate after effect of this is everyone has a sigh of relief. We're not gonna have chaos. But then they also go, "She's gonna get married, right?"
Ah, I'll honor about
And
that.
she immediately is like, "No, that's not my thing." Now, there's so much we can get into with Elizabeth, but the main thing of this was
We have no time.
talking about we're out of time, but was talking about the chaos of all these other reigns and rising up to it, and then just this giant national, that could have gone real bad.
Yeah.
And she reigns for, I want to say almost 50 years. Let's double check. So that's Henry VIII.
Did she get married?
No! Queen Elizabeth is famous as the Virgin Queen. She refuses to get married. She says, well, first of all, the law is stupid. She'd have to share power with the king. But she takes on this, not an isolationist approach, where England is separate and we're not being involved, but she manages to dance along all these major conflicts without ever really, like, stirring up a major war. Except with Spain, who decide Protestant devil woman must kill. And they send an armada, and she smashes it. Francis Drake was involved in that, and there's this... that's an amazing story of the armada. She has all of these great events. She was a sponsor of William Shakespeare.
Yeah.
She created all of these ideas about education and government. She also was somewhat controversial because she had some problems with the Catholics and also some problems with the Jews. Again, the Jews getting just screwed over.
Oh, I thought we were going to make it through an episode without mentioning
Nope.
the problem historically with people treating the Jews bad.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't put it as the problem with the Jews.
Yeah, I know.
Because that's literally a book written by Nazis.
Familiar.
But yes, so there's issues with her where it's not this perfect queen.
Right.
But it is so much better than so many people before her that she gets a ton of credit for that, because also reigning as a strong emancipated woman in a time where that wasn't a thing, she reigned for a full. Let me get it right. I gotta go through all of them. There's so many.
Edit this part out.
Yeah, edit this part out. Well, anyway, she reigns for 40 years.
40 years.
40 years. 40 years. 40, 40, 40, 40. Oh, no. Yep, 45 years. 45 years she's queen. That's super duper impressive.
Yeah.
That's a long, long life. She's like 70 years old. She was 70. September to March. Yeah. That's a really long life back then, especially. And she ruled as queen and was considered one of the more successful monarchs. But because she never had kids, she was the last monarch of the Tudor dynasty.
Oh, last Tudor. All right. Well, and I'm sure we'll discuss her again.
Talk about
And
her
the
again.
Tudors, I'm sure, at other times as well. But we're out of time for this
We're out
one.
of time.
But we did discuss the coronation, and I did learn things.
We talked about stuff.
Well done. So, if you enjoyed this a little bit of history, like and subscribe to the thing, and let us know that you're watching. And
Share the video with friends.
share, do all the stuff.
Do all this stuff. Help us out, guys.
Yeah,
We're
whatever.
informing you.
Uh,
Inform your friends.
And we're going to keep doing this every week. We're going to discuss new things. So next week,
Next week,
we're discussing
the first emperor of Rome.
what?
It's the coronation of the first emperor of Rome next week,
We're going
January 16th.
In 27 BC.
BC. So we're winding the clock back a little bit.
Either way, we're going from one coronation to another. How many people will die, and who amongst them will blame the Jews?
No Jews getting blamed next week.
We'll find out.
Pretty sure. We're gonna, fingers crossed, can get through 1 week without it. Let's see.
All right, so we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, guys.
Bye.